just press start on the video and think, off you go. You gonna go and get your stuff? You go and get your stuff. Morty and I went for a walk this morning, and it was really interesting to see all the habits that humans do, especially when their dogs bark, when people are walking past. We hear lots of crazy yelling, "Shut up, get in a bed." Shut up. All these humans acting crazy. It's really interesting. Habits. So when I'm talking about habits, the usual way of behaving in a situation, whether that's subconsciously, automatically, you're doing this as a habit, which is something that's repeated over and over and over until you're really good at it. And that can be a habit that's good or bad. I mean, let's not label it as good or bad. Let's just call it conscious or unconscious. There can be good habits and there can be bad habits. But the habits that I'm talking about, that I'm seeing when we go for a walk around the block, unconscious habits. So the lived experience for humans when they're in their human condition mindset and they're performing these crazy unconscious habits, the lived experience is, well, it's a type of suffering. It could be really trivial suffering, but all of these humans getting themselves worked up over a behaviour. And usually they're yelling out crazy things to their dogs while they're sitting down because they don't want to be disrupted from what they're doing. So when we're in our human condition mindset, we're forcing the situation because we're judging the situation. We're looking at things from a point of view of, I don't like that, this is making me angry, this is making me frustrated, I'm sick of hearing this, I'm sick of having to do this. So usually that's wrapped up in judgment, resentment, anger, frustration towards your dog. So let's talk about the behaviour that occurs as a result of our habits, not just your behaviour, that crazy reaction, which is a response to the environment or your immediate surroundings because of something that's happened. Your behaviour can be conscious or unconscious, just in that little snippet there of what we witnessed when we were going for a walk around the block. But other things, the behaviour can be conscious or unconscious. The behaviour can also be something that you choose not to react to, but then you're forcing yourself to suppress your own behaviour, just to suppress that habit, and that the lived experience of that is still going to make you suffer because you're suppressing your behaviour. And then resentment can creep in, and then you start thinking, why should I start suppressing my behaviour and not express the way I feel? So this is just going round and around in a circle, and it's really quite comedic to see these sorts of things. But it's also, it's not funny in a way because it's the dog that's suffering, truly suffering from these habits that humans that you have. And I want to ask you what sort of habits you might have when your dog barks at somebody walking past. Do you yell at them? Do you ignore your dog? That tells me a lot more about how you see your dog as a living, breathing, sentient animal that feels physical and emotional pain. It also tells me a lot about how you're going to continue on that pathway of unconscious habits. It also tells me a lot about how the lived experience is for your dog and the lack of emotional satisfaction that your dog is subjected to every single day. When we talk about being reconnected, and you knew I was going to get around to this at some stage, but when you're reconnected with your dog, you actually see situations and the reality for what it is. Your dog's just performing a behaviour, they're just barking. But if your habit is for your dog to either ignore your dog, yell at your dog, or even if your habit is to find a quick fix for your dog's behaviour that you label as a problem, or annoying to you, or frustrating to you, you might even put a shock collar on your dog. But then you try to justify using that shock collar by telling yourself, oh, it's only set on the low setting. I mean, so this sort of thinking in our human condition mindset, you can see how it has it's full of contradictions, but also absurd contradictions. Hey, Maud. So when you're reconnected with your dog, you're taking conscious action. You're seeing behaviour for what it is. It's just a behaviour. You're not yelling out crazy things to your dog. You're not hurting your dog. You're not thinking, oh, I've got to put a shock collar on my dog to suppress their behaviour. Because their behaviour is normal for them in that moment, in that particular point in time, because it's related to their emotional state. So you're seeing reality, but you're also seeing answers, because then you understand, hey, my dog is barking for a reason. Why is my dog barking? Or maybe it's the fact that I ignore my dog, or I yell at my dog, or I don't provide my dog with any mental stimulation, or I don't understand that my dog's been genetically manipulated to want to be with me and prefer to be with me, meaning the human, over their own species. So when you're reconnected with your dog, you're re-establishing a bond of communication or emotion, and that emotion is joy, compassion, empathy, warmth, and those emotions are incompatible with wanting to, for a start, suppress your dog's behaviour by through intimidation or punishment, like shock collars and prong collars, choke chains, punishment, intimidation, those sorts of things. But your lived experience is going to be one of joy, warmth, empathy and compassion. So what lived experience do you really want to have? Do you want to have one that's based on habits that are entrenched in your human conditioned mindset, that still have you judging, blaming, feeling resentment or anger towards your dog because you think you're right? Or do you want to have a lived experience where you're living with your dog in harmony, where you see your dog as a sentient animal that feels physical and emotional pain just like you, and they have emotional needs to ensure that they have emotional satisfaction? Think about how many things you're going to get to do when this video's over and you decided you've had enough of scrolling on your Facebook. You're going to get bored, you're going to get distracted, and you'll think, oh, what can I do now? I'm going to go and do something else. Well, what choice does your dog have in that matter? So the lived experience of being reconnected with your dog, it's a gentle shift into that mindset, into that state of being. It's more than a mindset, it's a state of being. And I'd probably just urge you just to take a few minutes and to ask yourself, where is your dog? Where is your dog? Is your dog out the back on their own? Has your dog been out the back on their own all week with nothing to do because you've been at work? Okay, fair enough. But sometimes being at work isn't fair enough, especially when that is taking you 8, 10, 12 hours of the day out of your home with your dog on their own for that amount of time. That's not conducive to any emotional satisfaction for your dog or for you, because you're going to be living in your human conditioned mindset and judging and blaming and still being resentful of your dog for their behaviour. But their behaviour is being driven by the situation that they've been shoehorned and forced to be living in for the next 15 years of their life, 365 days a year. So I think I've made my point, and I hope I've made my point. But before you label this video as being drivel or ridiculous or stupid, why don't you just take a step back and just think about your lived experience with your dog? And if it's one where you're always blaming your dog, thinking your dog's wrong for performing a behaviour, and you're blaming your dog for that, then you probably want to ask yourself, am I reconnected with my dog? And hopefully you'll be able to answer that question and do something about it. We'll talk again soon.